now we start the first podium discussion for this conference. I want to invite Larysa Denysenko, the moderator for the discussion, and it's going to be responding to GBV with war and protecting the rights of the victims on temporarily occupied territories. Oleksandr Panchenko, Serhiy Beseda, Andriy Khursa, Ihor Volokitenko, and Larysa. Please welcome to the podium. Greetings, everyone. It's great that we started the day with the results of things we've already done and what we talked about in the first day of the conference. We basically, the whole team is here. I only don't see Natalia, or she either comes back, but maybe not. It's 50-50. When we start this panel discussion, it's going to be about how gender-based violence, countering domestic violence and sex-based violence, as a how a regional view can either say that the problems are the same or different from the regions that are still temporarily occupied. Because temporary occupation, I think, in itself is violence. So the consequences of being in a temporary occupation can be different. People can lose trust in their community. There can be different conflicts within the community that can also impact the level of trust towards state institutions, so people to each other. There are a lot of painful topics that resurface after the territories are recovered and liberated. And the very horror, to face that horror that people have lived through during that occupation, when you're in that kind of world, it's hard then to come back to normal life. And I'm not even saying the word traumatization. I don't like this word, but people can feel not traumatization, but many other emotions. Aggression, pain, doubts, quarrels. But other than that, the police has a lot on their plate because they have to deal with many problems. The leadership tells you that these are our priorities, but still there's more work than. And how to juggle all of it, that's what we'll try to talk about during the panel discussion. But please stay within some 7 minutes of timing. Going to give you signs if we go outside the time constraints. So let's begin, and I want to start to listen to Oleksandr Panchenko, head of the Sumy Regional Prosecution Office. Oleksandr, please. It's not an easy region to work with, and I've been there, and I see that even now the community has not yet won their trust back. A lot of people still are turbulent, and that can impact the way how people even out their relationships. Hello, good morning. Indeed, there were a lot of problems, and we discussed the possible solutions already yesterday. Today we've presented these things. So as I was preparing for this, we have too many problems to list, not to take much of your time. I'll just tell you what's special about this, that we have only 555 kilometers of border, and a lot of that territory is still being shelled and occupied. So the war changed all of our lives, but it also served as a catalyst for the existing problems, and they've become more acute. So let me tell you some of the statistics, how we respond to gender-based violence in the war-torn region of Sumy. So comparing to 2021, why 21? Because year 22, the territory was temporarily occupied. People were leaving. And there were other challenges to respond to. So that's why, compared to 2021, the domestic violence has increased in Sumy region by 20%. In 2021, in 10 months, we registered 4,425 of them. In 2023, the same period, there were 5,523. But as everybody keeps saying, these statistical data are not entirely reliable, because how would you reflect the very recording of instances of domestic violence have only started just a few years, and now we have facilitated communication, facilitated the proper filing of complaint against domestic violence, and administrative citations written by police officers. Restrictive action was applied to corroborate these this data. There was acts of violence regarding 700 women, 1,000 children, 120 males. As a negative phenomenon in the region, which is daily shelled and attacked, was a piece of active warfare. This year, there were 21 serving military were charged for domestic violence. So again, this is a sign of how war plays out for people's psyche, who have to deal with so many negative things. They bring it all home. And in the units where they serve, their units cannot always afford psychologists to help them adapt after the terrible experience of war. So there are about 9 civil society organizations active in the region that provide different assistance to victims of violence, children, women. But the problem is that mostly these organizations have offices in the regional centers and in some communities. So it's not all the territory is covered by it. And they are working in daytime, no days off. So nighttime and the rest of the time, the victims are left to their own devices. As we were talking about the professionalism of everyone involved, the social services, the law enforcement, and I second that. There is some progress in law enforcement. We see that based on materials and quality of pre-trial investigation, but when it comes to implementation of different programs, yes, there are some programs in the region, but war corrected the way they can be organized. So they created Coordinational Council, about 38 mobile groups who can provide timely consultancy, legal. So there are organizations who provide humanitarian assistance. But what's the problem? Before the large-scale invasion in Sumy region, in Trostyanets community, they built shelter for 15 persons, so that people affected from these crimes could stay for a while until they find housing or employment. But it doesn't work anymore because it's too close to the border and that territory is constantly shelled. The rest of social work, only in the oblast center of mother and child, can accommodate women, but only children with children. The rest of people are not eligible to social housing, so they can be placed separately from the perpetrators of domestic violence, and it's a serious challenge. And the rest of the questions emerge from that. As I said, 555 square meters of border, and because of these historic, so to say, relations with the aggressor country, we still have a lot of populated areas on the border, close to the front line. Although there was a decision to resettle to 5-kilometer zone, but there are still populated areas that the border comes through, and a lot of residents lost their houses. Unfortunately, there are families with children that are in the risk zone of domestic violence, and for the social services and authorities to provide prophylactics or to get information about these families' situation are impossible because the military just don't let the people in. Either social services and even the law enforcers are not always in the position to respond when they get this signal about domestic violence. In many such residential areas, logistics or transport is very sophisticated or denied completely. So that's why these people are left alone with their problems. Not even talking about the possibility to inform about that, because the aggressors are regularly destroying people's mobile towers, etc. So not always you can get the information through. And when you do, when they get the signal, the police, if the police gets the signal, they respond to each instance. But unfortunately, there are sometimes bad examples in the region, and these couple of bad examples can cross out the entire positive work. For instance, there was a complaint from a woman about domestic violence committed by her husband. So that was registered based on Article 2025. But then she refused to cooperate with the investigation, and in a month she was murdered. And her husband also committed suicide. Another sad story is that the child who lived with the father and uncle had certain problems with health. And we also established the fact that about 4 years in a row, that the uncle and the father were sexually abusing this child, and we only found out about that afterwards. No social service have registered this family as dysfunctional, although the girl did live with the uncle and father in the same house, and that already was a signal. So we should account for these facts. And what other problems and challenges? Understaffing and how professional are and well trained are people in social services. You know, out of 4 psychologists that made a program in our region around the underage people who had a clash with the law, there's only 1 left. Many great experts moved abroad or to other regions, so the problem with the professional staff is still there. If the law enforcers, we have law enforcers, but we have those who go through training, and then social little affordable housing. There must be affordable housing. It's a program because forceful relocation will not resolve the problem of these people. They have to be resettled somewhere. So these kind of challenges are there in the region that, again, is daily shelled and was occupied. Thank you. So we've heard about the problems of the region that has the biggest, longest border with Russia, and went through temporary occupation, has been reliberated, but still there are shellings. Now, the temporarily occupied region, Zaporizhzhia, Serhiy Spil'nyk, head of the chief of local regional prosecution. Of course, domestic violence has to be under extra attention. So thank you for discussing that on such a powerful platform. Building some ways to improve the situation. We all know that most victims cannot ask for help or think that this help is not relevant because there are more important things. Especially it's relevant for our region close to front line, where we have almost 80% of the region occupied currently. Our gray zone is 280 kilometers, the line where our military are defending us and where our people are living as well, residents. And it's hard to get some information from out of that gray zone about any crimes or conflicts that have been committed. Just this year, from the temporarily occupied territories, there was no signal about gender-based violence. In Zaporizhzhia, they designed a plan of actions. There are coordination councils and committees. There are law enforcers there, local self-governance, civil society organizations, charity organizations, volunteer organizations. The communities have specialized support services for these people, centers, psychological assistance, and the hotline, telephone number, Center of Supporting Children with Families. They created chatbot, Zaporizhzhia Free from Violence. But at the same time, just like in Sumy, we are understaffed in terms of crisis psychologists who can work with lengthy traumas. But 9 communities only have 2 psychologists. And also, it is not helped by the fact that psychologist only is paid 7,000 hryvnia of salary. So, but there are now programs of subvention from the budget, about 8 million hryvnia for the daily social psychological assistance victims of violence. There are also possible crisis rooms for these victims. Why is it important? Because in our region, there are about 238,000 IDPs. A separate issue is the military with PTSD who come back to their families and also can commit domestic violence in different forms. Especially by now, as I believe, a very delicate topic. But we have to help our defenders to go through proper rehabilitation, resocialization, and give them. Since we are planning to work more actively, engage the military chaplains, working more in the military units. Another problem is that there is no clear algorithm of interaction between all the agencies. So as a result, the victim doesn't always know where to run, whom to talk to. So we created a word map so that there are understandable leaflets for everyone. We have planned online lessons in schools, working with the centers of IDPs. And I've just picked up to demonstrate these leaflets. They are a very understandable language, and it's really working. As a frontline region, because of the temporary occupation, we're left without a green room, which was in Melitopol. But we are now planning to open 3 green rooms in Zaporizhzhia. And from my experience, I worked in Dnipro, and I know that 80% of all the criminal proceedings were directed to the court with the use of green room, and that provided very positive solutions or decisions of the court. And now we are working on proper coordination between all agencies. The prosecution has been constantly participating in meetings with the forced refugees. They do these needs assessments and hubs in Hromadas. So they explain to them their rights, the interpretation of the law, they accept their requests, etc. And also, we focus our attention on the people who left the temporarily occupied regions or continue to be there. The local officials of self-governance who continue to work in that Oblast center, they're invited in coordination meetings that are conducted by the regional prosecution officers. We also look into the possible primary psychological assistance for children affected by domestic violence. When the police officers, when they arrive to the scene, they start talking to a child by establishing some kind of rapport, by bringing some soft toys. So if there is a request to law enforcement, not always can the citizen count on a quick response. Not always is it possible to call the police from wherever they are with the perpetrator. So Polina is a mobile group from Ministry of Internal, specialized in responding to domestic violence. But you also account for the number of mobile groups. In Zaporizhzhia, there are only 2 such groups working. They have a very limited geography, only in Zaporizhzhia.
But people who live in so-called gray zone, they don't have specialized support and assistance. And when I personally visit the gray zone, for you to understand what that is, overall, people live in basements there. And even in summer, when I visited it in August, they have this old-fashioned ovens, so like to prevent molding and humidity. and law enforcement and the government, we do everything possible to encourage them to move, but we cannot force them to do that, and that's why we discuss this aspect now as well. Probation is one of the priorities for local authorities and law enforcement, and special tools have been developed. And my personal opinion is that we definitely can improve about our probation. We need to find new approaches, how to act. And yesterday we had a conversation with our colleagues when we work in groups, that in the UK they focus more on working with victims, survivors and offenders. But as far as I understand that they have a lot of work for probation, and they don't work that much with probation and prevention. And I believe that we need to work on prevention. We need to be present in kindergartens, hubs, and other platforms. Thank you. Thank you very much. The topic of reintegration of veterans is important, but with Israeli model, it is advised to work with families of veterans, because people had completely different experiences for obvious reasons, and quite often the family need to understand what to expect, what behavior they need to avoid, how to build communication. And I hope that our community of psychologists and therapists are going to work on that. And it's important to understand how we should communicate with a person who was the prisoner of war and came back home, or if a spouse comes back from the gray zone, or even from the gray zone, not just being a veteran, because it's not easy to live in this territory, and these people live through the experience which we wish we never had. Let's move on. Serhiy Beseda, police colonel, so National Police, Donetsk region. Good morning, dear participants. Thank you for gathering so many people and giving me the opportunity to present our problems. Yesterday we discussed about different work which we did as well before 2022. I have to say that everything changed on the 21st of February 2022. So in Donetsk region, it's all the territory of active hostilities. Police are present in all areas if people live there. So the work of the police is really big. We do everything possible so that people trust us and come to us. We work with all cases that happen in our region on domestic violence, including, and we file all the reports. And it's very difficult to work with people with no electricity, with nothing, basically only police. They come and visit these people and they collect their reports. We started 40 criminal proceedings on domestic violence. 16 of them are on the stage of trial, and the rest are on investigation. And victims are women. Sometimes offenders are our soldiers or other men. Of course, it's hard to talk about this, but it does exist. In our region, we had forced evacuation last year, and everybody was supposed to leave, but people are not punished if they don't. We also have territory in Donetsk region, which was deoccupied in the direction of Svetohirsk and Liman. They were deoccupied last year, and it is true that Russian aggressors had behaved extremely aggressively. We found some buried bodies. Many people were missing. Also, there were 5 cases which we filed. 5 women who were victims of sexual violence from Russian soldiers. So these cases are now on the level of SBU as a war crime. And people who on the occupied territories, they had gone through terrible things. These people had to hide. They were humiliated. Some people switched sides. But I have to say that people are waiting for the armed forces of Ukraine, and they are waiting for liberation. We are trying to help people who live in those cities which are shelled every day. Police officers, we have groups of White Angels, so-called, and paramedics. They visit people after every shelling. They provide medical assistance. We also collect information about shelling. The majority of people who still live in this area, these are the elderly. They believe they cannot or they don't want to leave their homes. And police constantly encourage people to leave to save their lives, but many people don't want to. When there were active military activities in Bakhmut, you all know this area. It was going on for quite a lot of time, and we lost these territories, and many people stayed there. And what scares us the most, National Police and others in Donetsk region, when children die. I don't want to give general numbers, but 187 children died in our regions, and they could have been evacuated, and 295 were injured this year. These are 15 children who died, and these are the cases where we failed to convince people, the police and local authorities. We couldn't convince people to evacuate, to go to safer places. Now we are trying to do everything possible, and our police are keeping track of all citizens who still live there, who live in basements, cellars. And they've been living there since the full-scale invasion. Some people are hiding their children from the police so that they are not forced to evacuate. And I remember one case which was really difficult when there were not as many military activities in Avdiivka. It was possible to evacuate from there. And one family had a baby, 4 months old. They left, but then they came back, and the child died, and parents survived. So these are real examples from life. We try to tell the stories to parents who are still staying there. We try to convince them to leave. And we don't have any punishment for those parents who didn't preserve their children's lives, who refused to evacuate. And I believe that maybe something has to be changed on legislation level, so that the police or other institutions so they shouldn't be blamed because they do everything possible locally to convince people and families. We provide all possible information where people can go, which conditions can be provided. All Donetsk region are under shell, and we don't have any municipality which is safe. Artillery can reach every municipality, every community, and these are the areas of active military activity. And of course, we all have concerns about encirclement of Avdiivka because we understand what could happen next. We know what occupied territory is and what people experience if they live under occupation. And I want all of us to remember that there are parents who don't want to protect their children, and maybe we need to discuss some legal aspects of this because the war is not over. Thank you very much. It's a difficult conversation. We started with liberated territories which are under shelling, and then territories which are temporarily occupied, and then we moved to Donetsk region, which is all the territory of military activity, and it's very difficult for police to follow some security protocols because people are still there and they understand that they need to respond, and people still stay in these areas, and we need to remember the dangers for those people who fulfill their professional duties. Now, Kherson region. We understand all the horrors that they had under occupation, under attacks now, and of course we all remember Kakhovka Dam. So I'm giving the floor to Andriy Khursa. Good afternoon, good morning, dear participants. Having listened to my colleagues, I understand that we have a lot of common problems in the regions with active hostilities. Kherson region was almost completely occupied, and occupation lasted for 8 months. Now 1/3 of the region is liberated, the right side of the river. And police were basically first in contact after the occupation. It's so some of the police officers became collaborators. Some of them were fired because they didn't leave occupied territories. Some of them they were forced to relocate to safer regions. But the majority of our police officers, they served in the neighboring regions. And we came back immediately after the occupation. And there were many problems that we faced there. No electricity, no connection. It was complete blackout. The departments of the police were destroyed or mined. We worked from cars. So we didn't have premises where we could tell people to come to. But from the very first days, we started to receive reports about sexual violence and GBV. Until December, we had already 170 cases of GBV. So this problem always existed, just people couldn't report this under occupation. After the occupation, we started our work with GBV, and we started also to collect information about sexual violence from aggressors, occupiers. We had assistance from the central department. We found 72 cases like that. it's good that we could convince people to speak up, because not many people want to share. We could find some information through neighbors, and we tried to convince people to file. We try to encourage our female police officers to talk to local women, because it's easier to establish report. The victims are from 14 to 89, and men were also victims. They were tortured. There were a lot of torture rooms in Kherson. Now we continue our work. We respond to all cases of domestic violence, and these groups that visit people, they deserve a word, because all right bank of Kherson region, they are under shelling. All of them, most of them are along the river, and they are shelled from the left bank. It's a great achievement even to come and visit people if police receive a call. And 80% of all calls were processed in a proper manner. We try to work with all cases. So the other difficulties that we faced, courts didn't work. They started to work only in June this year. We had to send all the materials to Odessa region, Dnipropetrovsk region. It complicated the procedures. It was harder to bring the perpetrators to justice. It was hard to track whether it was systemic crime. And it was harder to open criminal proceeding. We documented 3,000 cases this year, but there used to be about 500,000 population. Now it's only 1/3 of this population. They stay on the territory of Kherson region. And it allows us to work with perpetrators and offenders, especially those who commit repeated crimes. So we engage the police officers from the left bank, because they cannot work on the left bank as it is occupied, so they work on our side of the river. We have a fully functioning group on combating domestic violence. We cooperate with regional military administration. They assisted with the shelter for victims of domestic violence. It was reopened, but then it was under shelling, so now it can function only during the day. We have 23 calls from occupied territories where they have connection, which shows that they have been under occupation for almost 2 years, but they still trust Ukrainian police. They try to get in touch with us using the national police short number, so they are waiting for us. People call us, and if there are some signs of criminal proceedings, so we open criminal proceeding. If it's administrative, then we can only provide consultation. We have the representative of the military administration. Probably we can hear more from her. Thank you very much. We see that if mobile teams are trained, those people who work with domestic violence in our conditions, in our context, it is easier to use their expertise, and it's also easier to work with victims of sexual violence, war-related sexual violence, because these teams already have skills to talk about sexual violence. Now we are moving towards the north. So we have Chernihiv region, Ihor Volokitenko, acting deputy head of the national police in Chernihiv region. In comparison to Kherson, probably it is a bit easier in Chernihiv region than in Kherson. Good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation. It is truly an important topic. Chernihiv region is bordering Sumy region, and we have common problems. We have also border with the Russian Federation and the border with Belarus. Every day we are under shelling territories which are near the border, especially. Of course, we need to do a lot of activity to protect lives of our citizens, and sometimes ambulance cannot reach timely, and in these cases, police officers, they deliver people to the closest hospital. And so we even help our citizens with their health. Now we have mobile teams, a domestic violence mobile team. They visit citizens at home if necessary. Also, we have mobile groups in Chernihiv with the biggest number of population. And that's where we receive the most reports about these cases. It is comprehensive. We talk about GBV and domestic violence, and the police try to respond on of this like the fact that this violence happened, and we try to prevent it further. So the main priorities are stated that we need to work with domestic violence, and we need to work on prevention, response, assistance, and then investigation, filing an investigation, and bringing the offender to justice. Why I wanted to list that, I believe that it's very important to work on prevention, which will prevent the violence. So we try to identify this problem at the early stages, and try to use these comprehensive measures by engaging social services and other institutions. And we know that more than 20 institutions, which are defined by law, which can work with domestic violence. And so as we work together, we can prevent escalation, which then will require police response. So as we understand how important prevention is, we try to engage as mobile teams, and we try to establish cooperation with all parties. And those 20 institutions, which are defined by the legislation, they have not only new powers, but also duties and responsibilities. So those who represent healthcare institutions, social services, educational establishments, they need to collect information about the possible cases of GBV and domestic violence. They need to inform the law enforcement about this. And now we can work through paper and through documented and through phone calls. And it is very important to respond promptly And now I would like to show a positive example of how our police work. Take into account all these factors I mentioned. We have a pilot platform, digital platform, which we use to exchange information among all institutions. So this software is not used in practice for everyone because of some legal aspects, but we can use this software for this cooperation and interagency work. We are going to show you a short instruction how to use this platform so that you know how this platform can help you. Why we need to have systematic approach to domestic violence? Because the victim might need not only physical protection but psychological support, temporary shelter, or legal assistance. Different institutions are responsible for every aspect. And as the system of information exchange is not perfect, they don't do it promptly. Victims cannot receive comprehensive assistance, and it increases risks. Children who become witnesses are often left behind or outside of the attention of different services. Can we act more promptly? Yes. We can use a digital registry. A regional registry of domestic violence is a multifunctional, innovative system. It can inform immediately about cases of domestic violence. This information can be provided to all institutions. So police, social services, healthcare, legal assistance, education can get access to this registry. All details are added here, the date, address, and whether children are involved as victim or witness. It allows us to organize and arrange cooperation of all the institutions and provide comprehensive set of services to victims. This type of registry can improve our communication and protect human rights. This was a very short video where we defined main issues and the possible solutions that this pilot digital platform can solve. All institutions need to evaluate their level of risk, and on this pilot platform we can do it digitally. You can define risks, presence of children involved, and all possible negative factor. And then, having analyzed all the input, then necessary institutions are informed. What we received as a result, a person who works in a state institution receives information quickly, and they can work with it. But it's very important to analyze whether the fulfilling the task is done successfully. Of course, it's not enough just to collect statistics, but we need to evaluate whether certain situation was resolved. For example, if there was a child involved, then child services should be informed and the child needs to be provided assistance. So this way, we are trying to plan and analyze different issues where we can improve our work, where we can input our proposals, and we hope that a registry like this can be used nationwide. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Ihor. This is a good introduction to the second panel, where they're going to discuss coordination of all services. which are working with GBV and survivor-oriented approach. And now we have the last speaker of this panel, Larysa Denysenko, Deputy Head of the Department of Social Guarantees, Family Matters, IDPs, Gender Policy, Combating Human Trafficking, and in Kherson region. So you are responsible for a lot of vulnerable groups. And Andriy has already mentioned about calls from temporarily occupied territories of Kherson, that police trying to help people on the right bank of the river under shelling, under the temporary shelter cannot fully function because it's under shelling. So how can you service function? What can you help with for our further discussion?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. The regional military administration and our residential areas, the rayon administrations, they do everything they need to protect the rights and freedoms of not only affected people, but also IDPs, children, families with many children and orphans. Our department, and my department in particular, is dealing with organizing resorts and rehabilitation for children, for orphans, people, children with no parents or guardian, flooded houses after Kakhovka dam explosion, and houses destroyed by shelling. All these categories are covered, and we organize rehabilitation for them. So now we have a Google form. The parents can fill it out, and we then can select the categories of children whom they can be invited for rehabilitation abroad. There are relocations to Romania. Also, there's a group of about 108 children from different categories of children to go to Poland. There's also options to have rehabilitation not only abroad but in Ukraine. Plus, we have the Council on battling the GBV and human trafficking, which involves not only authorities but also national police, migration service. So at the start of November, there was a meeting where people are now leaving occupied territories. Some of them go abroad, some to safer regions, but some would rather stay close to their home. So they become forcefully relocated, but closer to their houses. So if you compare with data of the IDP database, then it was about 32,000 such people. Currently, the number has grown a lot, so now there's 42,000. Most of them are IDPs, internally displaced persons within our region. But there are also many of them from Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Crimea. For all of these people, in the occupied communities, there are different hubs. There are centers of assistance to civilian population. Also, supported by civil society organizations, there are mobile brigades for social psychological assistance to people affected by domestic violence and gender-based violence and human trafficking. So there are currently 6 of these brigades. Before the large-scale invasion, there were only 3 all over the region. Now there are 6 brigades servicing the 17 communities that are currently deoccupied. To save the lives and health of children, the regional administration decided to forcefully evacuate such families from the residential areas that are under shelling. So they are not transported just anywhere. Social housing is provided to them, as well as social support, and while they're on the way with the evacuation train, they will be expected by the volunteers, the humanitarian assistance, and they will even have their first cash assistance, depending on what that is. Other than that, in Kherson, we had shelter for domestic violence victims. This shelter currently is a daily care center, because the facility has been damaged badly by the shelling. So for IDPs and other people who lost their housing, there are about 8 facilities that people can stay temporarily while they decide what they're going to do next. And according to Decree 930, there's a list of places for IDPs to have residence in. So they're doing everything they can. We also work with the police. They provide statistical information to us and some other information that we need to provide more assistance to people and avoid unnecessary stress, because emotionally people are overwrought. They are often aggressive even to their loved ones. So we're trying to do everything we can and even beyond, so that people can get back to life they had before. So basically, we exhausted the time to present the opinion of each of you. And we can see that security is the biggest challenge for everyone in the region. Conscious parenting, and we see that the trust in the justice and police and prosecution is very important. People are happy when the territory is liberated and when they see the police officers. I've seen that with my own eyes how important it is to understand. That's how Ukrainian institutions return, as well as freedom. And how good are mobile groups as a means of communication for men and women that survived gender-based violence, and algorithms of actions. If we write them in leaflets, as Serhiy showed how you can work ahead and preemptively and decide what's the best thing to do. So it's important for people to have a simple algorithm so they understand what we can provide as a system, what we cannot provide temporarily, or what problems they can expect on their way. Because to notify it's a brave step, but then people have to understand what should be done next. So we have 25 minutes for discussion, communication with the panelists. So give me a signal who wants to say something, ask a question, or share your experience or reflection as to what you just heard. So please, you will have the microphone provided. I don't see you well, but if somebody may help me, if somebody really wants to ask something, don't hold back and do get involved in commenting. Maybe you can guide us on what we have maybe missed out, so please be more active. While people are we've been talking about frontline territories, liberated territories. It's important for you to understand, when I first got into the gray zone, which is close to the occupied territory, we are talking about the groups of people who leave. But for you to understand, our enemy is jamming communication. There's no communication. Sometimes there's access to Starlink, maybe. But again, it's just for the armed forces of Ukraine and police. There is no other way. So with the occupied territory, there's no Ukrainian communication. They sometimes get access on the internet so that they can direct a message. So when our groups go there to the gray zone, as I got there first, you come to Gulay Pole, 7 kilometers from frontline. You can't even come in. It's so damaged by shelling. And we were walking on foot because you can't just walk right there. Aviation bombs, everything. Even if you have some kind of passage, but there's so much debris that you cut your wheels. You cut your 4 wheels. If you damage them, you won't get back. So you have to keep your car safe. So the people live in cellars. If you see that there's a smoke, that means that they have this oven going and fire, and that leads to latent crime because there's no communication and you can't actually claim anything. And only after talking to people you understand what's happening, who committed what. Not even with this person, but with someone who lives 5 houses away. And thanks to our law enforcement and our police, it's all collected. And then they're registered, investigated. People are only walking there in flak jacket and helmets all the time with weapons, 20, 25 kilograms with additional weight, and women as well. So when I see those women and they carry 30 kilometers, but they still go ahead, and so I want to thank our law enforcers who do their job. So they still do their job with these terrible circumstances, and that's what I have seen. Yeah, you know, it's a challenge of your profession. Both men and women take this challenge. You know, we have to carry that weight because it saves people's lives. But let's again run this way. Maybe you have some comments or questions. Please join in on the microphone. Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you for sharing your experience. You know, I have a question because before the large-scale invasion, starting from 2019 or 18, even when the new law on battling domestic violence was designed, policies were designed, how certain agencies should interact and respond together to domestic violence. Of course, the war had changed a lot of our plans, but how much our policies account these risks with the large-scale invasion. Because if we cannot work on frontline territories the way we work with other territories, to what extent legally all these peculiarities are accounted? Because we all know that it's unclear when the war ends, and it's possible it's for many years ahead. So we need to regulate this in legislation. So how realistic this assistance? Indeed, it's a valid question. All these legal framework, it did start working. You see that even statistics is positive. The documenting of cases. But, you know, as I said, currently these programs are hard to implement. Yes, they were designed, the money was allocated, but you cannot do anything without a specific person in the position, without a psychologist or mediator, whom we don't even have them in the region. So it's not quite doable. Even if you have the money for salaries, etc., but without people, you can't do anything. The rest, well, the regions are using or inventing or adapting in this program the way I liked Chernihiv project. So yeah, they are there, but in order to shift this. We need to exchange all information with law enforcement, with education establishments. If we have this information timely, we can prevent not only documenting and recording. So prevention is the most important. So currently, only through exchange of information and full interaction with all law enforcement agencies, that's the only way. So police officers who are the first to respond to a situation, they will also require psychological assistance because they take it personally sometimes. It gets into their mind, and so we do have these challenges. So, but the programs have not changed, considering the new conditions in territory occupation, liberated territories. So the changes have been introduced, and you have to act and recreate it in those conditions that the region lives in. Like in our region, for instance, there was a program for 22-26, but it was adopted in 2021 before a large-scale invasion. And there were a bit different problems. So the Coordination Council works with the regional council where all the law enforcers that work in territorial communities, they're also working. But the ways to do these things are complicated. So they shouldn't have been doing so many amendments in 2021. But they do work on recovering this program for 2024, 2023. So considering, so yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, there is one question and a reflection, in particular around this regional register of domestic violence cases. I think it's a very effective mechanism of this very coordination. And I have a question to Ihor. Could you tell us more? Have you succeeded in delivering this project? Do you have any successful cases? And if so, how then you collected informed consent of the survivor that would cover all of them? So thank you for the question. It's been created within the Coordination Council initiated by the police. And I want to also stress that the most important idea that all people have iPads or electronic gadget where they can store information. And it can only be stored with the consent of the affected person. As I said, the register is as a test platform. So with the legal aspect, it still cannot be applied 100%. So the important task was to work around problems in digitalization. So it allows us to fulfill all the technical action that are determined by the law in terms of informing, and also analyze the efficacy of work of each governmental agency, and then how effective was each particular employee. So as we talk about possible conflict situation, because sometimes a proper employment can serve as a stabilizer of psychological state of a person. So the task is to show within a certain structural unit how effective it is. And you can see where the gaps are. We're talking about so the number of services provided, but it's not assessing the quality of those services. But the system allows for automatic analysis and see whether the facts are repeated and identify the reasons for that. So with this kind of information, anyone can improve their operational activity and prevent gaps from happening. And of course, when the conclusions will be drawn and analysis will be provided, the guide, the assurance, then of course everyone will see how effective they were in delivering their tasks. If we talk about successful cases, considering what I said, that it's a test platform, it was only used for test efficacy with the consent of a person, and we have positive results in getting this information, which allowed to prevent more severe complications. Thank you, Igor. We have a couple of couple of minutes for commenting. So, do I see hands, or it's only So, as far as I understand, we can wrap with this panel discussion. Thank you for your work so much, and thank you for finding a time to be with us. And I hope what you've heard today gives you motivation for people to understand what problems you run into as a team, and to understand what we can do to help people who live in a difficult situation, who are in this microclimate of gray zones, who don't always entirely understand where they and how they live. Because if you are in the cellar and shelter all the time, you don't always remember what country you're living in, because survival is a different thing. You lay your problems, postpone every other question. So it's a very problematic issue, and it creates a lot of system for justice and for people. It's important for people to understand the risks and understand that you don't always provide everything. You cannot always save people from shelling or violence, because it's just maybe not possible. I want to pass the floor to Irina Slavinska. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk.